Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. It's a little bit before the start time this evening. We're just going to get moving here and see as more catch on and join. But I wanted to remind us all of the good old days. Now, it's hard to believe this was 21 years ago, 2000, when Shaggy came out with that infamous song where he called up a friend and he said, "Man, I got caught. What should I do?" And he gives a little story about what happened. And most women have been there. Um, uh, but he says, "Hey, just say it wasn't you." And he's like, "She saw me. She came in my apartment and saw what happened. She knows it was me." He says, "Dude, you didn't listen. Say it wasn't you." And so this is really what we're seeing right here as politicians step back. Social media starts to step back, and the truth starts to roll forward, and yet many hold their ground. And I haven't heard from Pelosi in a while, the saying, "Hey, it wasn't me," right? Fingers get pointed, no accountability. Now, there's several different directions to go with this. We all know that what we're facing right now is a lack of accountability because you can't go over those that are in government offices, right? So if in fact somebody wins a lawsuit, like there was a recent lawsuit announced in California so that churches could open, and there was an award of, I believe it was $1.35 million in legal fees back to the individuals who sued Governor Newsom. But of course, he doesn't dig into his pockets. That comes from taxpayer money as punishment for allowing the King Newsom to rule this state. But this is what we're dealing with right now with quote unquote human beings, people. If you can't go after people who did you wrong, what's going to be the next step when we have AI? Now, I will remind you that my background is in autonomous vehicles. I train robot cars in the quickest sense of it. And what happens when a vehicle hits another person? Now, there's a lot of different aspects of this because if an autonomous vehicle is truly an autonomous, who is responsible? If somebody is behind the wheel, then they would be responsible. But as we've seen, so many individuals have hopped in the back seat and not even been in the front seat. Who is responsible? Now, in these cases at this point, it has been explained to them that no, you do not have a fully autonomous vehicle. It is a test vehicle, and there are restrictions, and they've gone around it, so the liability shifts. But as we move forward through full production and release, individuals are going to buy self-driving vehicles. They're going to pick them up, take them from point A to point B. There will not even be a steering wheel or brakes in the car. It'll just be a capsule. It'll be a basic chassis on the bottom, and the model on top will shift and change if you want a truck or a bus or a car or whatever it is. You could train them together if you want. But essentially, who's going to be responsible in that case? Is it the auto manufacturer? Most manufacturers are not directly involved in autonomous vehicles. There's an arm's distance there. So is it the company like a Waymo who manufactures the autonomous vehicle software and sells it off to manufacturers, or puts it on uh, uh, manufactured cars via a partnership and signs off a waiver letting that company know that in fact they will not be liable? They're taking all liability. Who will the insurance companies go after anyways? They're going to go after the deepest pockets. But the bottom line is there will be no responsibility, there will be no accountability when AI is involved. Because even when you go after corporations, it's very similar to the veil of protection that the politicians have. It's not a human you're going after. Nobody goes to jail. There is no criminal prosecution for murder of reckless driving. What about the software engineers that were involved? The company who sold the product way before it was ready or pushed updates that weren't ready. Just shifting and pointing the finger, just like Shaggy taught us, it wasn't me. is going to become more and more prevalent as we shift the way that the spin doctors run the pointing of the fingers. This isn't good for society. AI is not your friend. Sure, the latest cool gadget is awesome. I remember as a kid, boy, I really wanted that bright yellow Walkman. I wanted to be able to run and exercise with the music. And then the Watchman came out. Remember the Sony Watchman, that brick, literally a brick that had a little tiny screen on it that was only black and white with this long antenna? Oh, I was so excited the day I got that. And yet, those were small devices that you could turn on and turn off. They were cool and fun and entertaining, but that was the extent of it. Remember the Commodore 64s? If you wanted a game on that, you'd better start programming it. I remember staying up days at a time with programming magazines, programming one game after another. It was a fascinating period of time for me, but that game didn't get up and do the dishes, didn't drive me around, didn't control my life. At the end of the summer, school started, and that was used as a tool to type my papers, which thank goodness we were done with typewriters. So what do we do as politicians, as corporations, say, hey, it wasn't me? And not only are they saying that it's not them, their lawyers are saying, say it's not you. The insurance companies are saying, say it's not you. The level of integrity has gone out the door as lies rise forward. It's disgusting where we're at today. So these are life lessons according to Shaggy. In the face of the truth of what's happening, step back and just say that it wasn't you. So as we move forward, I want to look at some other things that are happening here. Now, digging deep, it is very difficult right now to grab articles that I had archived, and links are gone and they've moved. So there's not a lot I can grab right now. But we did learn about 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago now, but I believe it was about 7 years ago, that out of, I believe it was the state of West Virginia, there were in the neighborhood of 43 different contractors that were awarded contracts by the federal government to release chemicals from airplanes in California. And yet that never happened. And yet, with all those companies out there, and you and I can look up in the sky and see these big trails that clearly did not come from commercial airplanes, we're still being told, hey, it wasn't me, in one form or another. And yet the government contracts show the awards and the companies and the lists. So when we dig deeper, the facts are there, but most people don't dig deeper. And once they do, the lies grow even bigger. So in addition to that, there was a series of articles that came out today, and it talked about cloud seeding. So what is cloud seeding? Cloud seeding improves a cloud's ability to produce precipitation by adding tiny particles called ice nuclei, which water needs in order to freeze. And they add this, injecting it right into the cloud. Usually used chemicals for the purpose of cloud seeding include dry ice, silver iodide, liquid propane, and sodium chloride. Now the thought is by the time it whittles on down back to Earth, it's fine. However, news articles are coming up quite persistently today on that subject. And I am very grateful. I have just an absolutely beautiful vegetable garden, and I've got a lot of fruit trees. And my vegetables were just about ready to be harvested. And I have a different garden that has wildflowers and a lot of sunflowers that were just standing up and ready to open. And in 2 days, everything died off. Completely died. We didn't have rain. What fell in the area or what came through our water that just killed off everything in a moment? Now, if it came in the water, there's been talk about how did the cooties escape the lab in WHAN? Many had suggested it came through the water, and it could have come through the drinking water. It could have come through the water via when it's heated up, vapors, and it may not have come through the water at all. But we just don't know is the point. But what we do know is there's plenty of evidence that scientists really make it rain by cloud seeding, which is using chemicals to change and play God. So if we look back, the earliest evidence that we got on this was actually back in around the Olympics, right, in China. And in the what would we have here? What was that in the Beijing Olympics? I think that would have been about in 2011, Beijing announced that they planned to make it rain to ensure a perfect Olympics. And I remember what they were announcing was that they had been testing this since 2008. And in fact, they were able to make it rain with the left hand to divert rain around an area where it would normally rain, and therefore they could have areas with no rain that would not block or get in the way of their Olympics. Now, in July 30th of 2016, there was article in Business Insider that said, "Make it rain. China used weather modification to control the Beijing Olympics." The project is part of a larger campaign of so-called weather modification techniques that the country has been using since, and here it confirms again, 2008. So we know it's happened. The world told us it happened. In 2011, there was an article by Global Public Square blogs that says China uses missiles to make it rain. Let me tell you, this practice in China is not new. Chinese everywhere have been doing it, even those in Singapore. It's only because of the drought that has affected 10 million Chinese. So if they can make it rain, and they can divert the water away from an area to stop it from raining, then I go back to, it wasn't me. What happened in Texas this year? My friends, that was not God. That was not nature. That was a manipulation, and we've been told it can happen, and it's been used over and over again. Texas was one of the core states that was speaking out against what was happening. And boy, were they taught a lesson. And you know what? Now they're running even faster ahead. So who else does manipulation? Thailand in 2019 was really delving deep into making it rain to help block the pollution. We had heard that Gates was very much involved in weather manipulation and even moving towards blocking the sun. And geoengineering of all levels has been involved in cloud seeding as a technology, and that term can be looked up for more information. So what if a farmer goes in and plants all the seeds in his land, and then the government comes in and routes massive rains and the seeds wash away? You know, often in a lot of the world, the farmers take everything they have to buy their seeds for the year. Everything they have is in the hands as they put them back in the soil. When those wash away, that goes hope for the year. This is devastating. Now, I will remember, you know, right out of the university, I did an immense amount of traveling and lived in a lot of countries. It was a phenomenal experience. Now, again, this was back before 9/11, when you could just grab some cash, go down to an airport, look on the board, see when the next flight was taken off, and hop on. Long ways from that at this point. But I always had a backpack with me and would take weekend trips or longer. I just made sure that life was my own, and the adventures that I had, the lessons that I learned, and the blessings of guidance that I received are stories for another time. But everybody in this lifetime should have that awakening. And yet through that process, I really saw how much of the planet was being manipulated. The lies on one media station versus standing in a public square and absolutely witnessing peaceful conversations or silent protests asking for government help. And yet on the news, it would show massive attacks and bombs being thrown and weapons being used. And yet I had been in the square the entire time and none of that occurred. And yet that's what we're seeing here is the manipulation of the media where they just run their own tapes. They film it in a studio, they do an overlay, and they tell you this is what it is. And they don't specifically say, here's our agenda, but here's the storyline we've created. Now you go along with it. We are so far away from the truth. And again, Shaggy says, just say it wasn't me. Now, we did learn that during the January incident, a number of Pelosi's laptops were removed, and those have not popped up yet for our viewing. In fact, they even pegged it on some young woman that she had taken them, and then apparently at some point there was raid at her house and they didn't identify him. But everybody knows who took them and where they're at. We're just waiting for the truth to be posted. And on that line, where are the Biden laptops? Now, the information that has been relayed from those are so bad that even Alex Jones spoke up and made it clear within his organization, not one individual was to look at that material or download that material or have any of that material on their devices because it was so horrible that they didn't want that to be a reason for them to have criminal charges against themselves just for looking at it, even from a media perspective for true journalism. No games. They took the information from another individual who went into an FBI office, monitored it with the FBI, and never put it on their computers either. And it was so horrific that the FBI monitoring and the journalists could not get through it. It was so disgusting. Now, where's that, and how is that still not proceeded into any arrests? You know why? That's right. Shaggy taught us it wasn't me. So again, here's an article from 2016. China spent millions on a shady project to control the weather ahead of the Beijing Olympics, and dozens of other countries are doing it too. This summer, China set aside $30 million. So for those Olympics there that are really about highlighting human potential, has become a massive manipulation and grab for money. And it's not just much how we're going to get on ticket sales, it's how much money can I squeeze out of the organization, the taxpayers, to build massive buildings and structures. And by the way, line my pockets along the way, but hey, it wasn't me. So they spent $30 million that is known for the controversial project that involves shooting salt and mineral-filled bullets into the sky. And their mission was to make it rain. The project was part of a larger campaign of so-called weather modification techniques that the country has been using since at least 2008, when they claimed to have cleared the skies for Beijing Olympics by forcing the rain to come early. China is far from the only nation trying to bring or stop the rain. In this article, at least 52 countries reported by Business Insider, including the United States, that's 52 countries, have current weather modification programs. Really? How much do you know about the weather modification programs in the United States? When the meteorologist comes on each evening, does he tell you about the weather modification that happened in your neck of the woods that day? So 52 countries have current weather modification programs, 10 more countries than just 5 years before that, according to World Meteorological Organization. And again, this article was from July of 2016. We're now in 2021. This article was produced by Aaron Brodwin, Business Insider. Operation Popeye. It all started in the 1940s. Now, what else happened in the 1940s? Yeah, Roswell. 1940s is about also when David Wilcock announced they were rolling into the friendships, that we are not alone, we have never been alone, and the friendships that ensued in that period of time. So it all started in the 1940s when a pair of scientists from GE, look at that. Did you also know that NASA did not start out as the original space program? Of course, we all know that it's come out from the military years ago, but they had to have some kind of a front to put it behind a pseudo corporation. And TWA was actually the original contract award by the government to explore space. That was TWA. We all remember TWA. There are kind of a lot of jokes about the uniforms that the flight attendants would wear. But TWA is long gone, and NASA, never a straight answer, stepped in their shoes. So here we have, it all started in the 1940s when a pair of scientists from General Electric were experimenting with using supercooled clouds to stimulate the growth of ice crystals while hiking Mount Washington, the mountain located in New Hampshire. Now remember, I just told you that out of that Virginia area, 43 different contracts were awarded a few years ago in order to allow contractors to experiment with chemicals being released in the California skies. And this is New Hampshire, right there, next door neighbor. It's from the 40s. Is often called the stormiest mountain in the world, and it's considered a prime spot for cold weather testing. After a series of experiments there and in New York, the two researchers managed to make it rain using silver iodide bullets. This is from the 40s, and that's similar to what was being used with the Chinese. They got a patent for their technique referred to as cloud seeding in 1948. A few decades later, the U.S. military brought cloud seeding to the battlefield. Yep, they weaponized it. Between 67 and 72 during the Vietnam War, it spent roughly $3 million each year on weather modification, designed to draw out the monsoon season and create muddy, difficult conditions for enemy fighters. One campaign involved an attempt to flood the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the main route that enemy fighters were using to deliver their supplies. There's a snippet of a document from the Federation of American Scientists, FAS, detailing the campaign. The objective of the program was described as follows: increase rainfall sufficiently in carefully selected areas to deny the enemy the use of the roads by 1. Softening road surfaces, 2. Causing landslides along roadways, 3. Washing out river crossings, 4. Maintain saturated soil conditions beyond the normal time span. The purpose of the effort was to increase rainfall during the normal monsoon season and thus to disrupt Vietnamese logistics. 2,600 weather modification sorties were flown. Evidence presented by Department of Defense. Now, according to the FAS, the effects ended up being minimal. But as we know, they're playing God. They're manipulating weather patterns, and they weaponized it for war. Although, of course, it wasn't me. Now, as we look in here, you can also search. U.S. Department of Defense has a search.usa.gov site. And on there, contracts that have been awarded are listed. And it's quite an interesting feat there of searching through the contracts that have been awarded. As we see a lot of these clippets on the news, there isn't really much detail here. But as we look through a site like this, you can see line after line after line of what's being administered by this particular administration. And that's U.S. Department of Defense. You can go to search.usa.gov, and that will pull you right on there. The more data points you can get as truth help pull you further. Because again, It wasn't me. So what do we have here? Facebook has taken an about turn. There's been several articles that came up. This one came up 45 minutes ago from Reuters. Facebook extends ban on donations to lawmakers who voted against B. If a lawmaker voted against them, then Facebook is not going to allow donations to that individual. Again, who died and made them God? Facebook Inc. said on Thursday it will resume making donations to U.S. lawmakers through its Political Action Committee. So it's going to allow it, but will not support 147 lawmakers who voted against president electoral certification in January. If you didn't vote my way, take your ball and go home. The company had suspended all donations in the wake of the January Capitol incident, pending review. And now they decided your friends can donate. If you're not a friend, you cannot. This information was confirmed by a reporter from BuzzFeed. The company did not say how long the ban on donations to Republicans who voted against certification will last, but clearly they're rigging elections. Now, what else do we have here? Today, and this is posted 15 minutes ago, but I do know that this article came out earlier today, so this must have been an update that posted 15 minutes ago. Facebook, whistleblower to Tucker Carlson. It's highly immoral to censor users with vax concerns. Morgan Kamen, the Facebook whistleblower who was suspended by the tech giant after leaking, let's see what they called it here. There was a specific term that they were using. Now this was, the story was broke, just like so many of them, by Project Veritas. James O'Keefe is just doing an absolutely phenomenal job here. And they use a specific term here called the VACCINE, hesitancy. And they had algorithms set up. So if there's anything in that direction of creating a hesitancy, then they were blocked, shadow banned, removed, whatever it took. It's crimes against humanity. But hey, it wasn't me. You know, as Zuckerberg and Dorsey and they all went ahead and stood up in front of Congress with this flippant answers, these smug individuals who've been made billionaires by DARPA, and yet each one, it wasn't me. And at the level that they did take accountability, it was not quite in the direction of anything substantial. So one more turnabout for Facebook, a lot of information coming out. This was 17 hours ago, and this was reported by Breitbart. Breitbart said Facebook is going to allow speculations on man-made cooties origins. Now, isn't that nice of them? They're going to allow people to start thinking about it. Since all of this information came out 14 months ago, people were banned, removed, blocked, removed from office for even suggesting this. And now the truth is looped around again to realize, wait a minute, there's more facts there than against it. So Facebook released a memo, according to Breitbart, detailing its new stance, pointing to ongoing investigations, like when is a social media company an investigator, as reasons for its change of heart, while adding the proviso under restrictions remain. A spokesperson for the company said, in the light of ongoing investigations into the origin of cooties and in consultation with public health experts, we will no longer remove the claim is man-made from our apps. Wait a minute, they'll no longer remove it? They're going to put it back in? Well, there's a double negative. We're continuing to work with health experts to keep pace with the evolving nature of the pandemic and regularly update our policies as new. Now, again, if people want to speak the truth, let them speak the truth. We have certain protections that protect our eyes, our ears, and our heart. And that should not be allowed as part of free speech. But free speech should be allowed. In October, Google and YouTube made a similar promise. The decision expanded Facebook's current rules relating to theories related to the cookies time period, its origins, and the jab programs underway worldwide. Yep, as we know, this was a global change. And again, Project Veritas reveals Facebook internal documents on censoring. But hey, Shaggy reminds us it wasn't me. So that's the wrap up for this evening. We'll continue to dive into these subjects as we move forward. But thank you very, very much for joining us, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening.